So welcome, Special Education Boss fan page. Thanks you guys for jumping on. We're going to be training tonight on writing effective IEP goals, benchmarks, objectives, kind of where the goal comes from, where is it given birth. And then we're also going to update over and kind of circle back, talk about evaluations during COVID because they are unbelievably important. Did you guys have a fantastic day? Are you enjoying remote learning? Are you the teacher of the year in your formal dining room? So God bless teachers. Thanks for all that they're doing. They do so much. This has really revealed how much they do, and we are thankful for them. So I wanted to give a shout out to one of my favorite people. I know so many gifted people in education, and the great Abby, she knows who she is, reminded me of some specific content areas that we had in our training for guidelines for writing IEP goals. So we're going to do that. So real quick before we get started, hey guys, if we haven't met for some reason, I always think that the whole world has met me. It's the weirdest thing. So I'm Mayer Cunningham, Special Education Boss. I represent families who have children with disabilities in 504 meetings or special education meetings, serving kiddos between the ages of 3 and 22. And what I know is that when we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody. And we are sitting in those meetings, we're collaborating, sometimes working through hard stuff, even if we have to for one thing, and that's for successful student outcomes. So it's about successful student outcomes, and the legal threshold for special education, the three targets we're headed for legally in special education is gainful employment, independent living, and further education, whatever that looks like, right? Gainful employment, whether that's supported volunteering work, supported partial work, paid work, full-time work, running the entire world, whatever that is, gainful employment. Independent living, that could be independent living. Maybe you're finally making your bed in your bunk bed. Maybe you live in a supported home. Maybe you live on your own. Gainful employment, independent living, and further education. So we want our kiddos, no matter what their disabilities are or differences are, to be able to access education post-secondary after high school and training. So that's why we're in these meetings. That's why we're working through the hard things. Sometimes your biggest victory is from your hardest struggle. So don't get weary in well-doing for your kiddos. And we will keep working on that. We'll do walking through the guidance for, hey, from California, for evaluations during COVID. Because here's what I know. I don't know a lot. But IDEA didn't change because of COVID. Your IEP didn't change because of COVID. So the IDEA law is still the law. We didn't get rid of it. And your IEP is your IEP. It doesn't turn into a different IEP because of COVID. And I would think whether or not people sign that or don't sign it, if they've signed something that wasn't valid, it's not valid because you signed it. So whatever your child's IEP was the day before we closed the world is their IEP. And those are templates, the entire IEP document, to show us a child's needs and their areas of concern and what we're working on remediating. So I know that's hard. I know that you guys are not, probably special education teachers. Maybe you are. It's kind of funny. My friends that are actually teachers and they're at home, they're like, what day can they go back? And so we are all counting the days. I saw a video on Facebook today, and it was a mom, and she pulls up, and the 3 girls get out, and she just throws the backpacks out the window, and she drives off, and it says first day back to school. And that might be not a joke, right? So every state has an SEA or an LEA, that's a local education agency or a state education agency, and they govern, they give you governance and guidelines based on input from federal law and federal guidelines. And so our state, Texas Education Agency, has a phenomenal website. They give COVID updates. Everything that you could possibly need to know is there. Today they posted up some new tips for English learners, which means English as a second language, and you can avail yourself of that. Tips for families for English learners. It was, I think, in I'm guessing 4 or 5 languages. It's on Twitter, it's on Instagram, it's on Facebook. The website is www.txel.org, www.txel.org, and it had tips for that. The messages were in English, Spanish, Vietnamese. I want to say something else. I can't remember, but they are on there. So there's resources there, how to connect in that way. So hopefully by now we've all talked to the school. The school's talked to us. I'm still surprised at how many of my families that just got an email today. We've closed for COVID. You're kidding. I didn't notice that. I didn't notice he wasn't getting on the bus every morning at 7:45. So again, like we talked about, what do I want you guys to do? Complain, complain, complain. No. We're not complainers. We're reigners, right? We never complain, compare, and compete. I want you to get a book, a notebook, and I want you to take data. I don't necessarily want you to take data on your kids' IEP goals. Certainly, if you can share that information with the staff, that would be purposeful. But I want you to get a notebook. And what happened March 12th? What happened March 16th? I got an email from Miss Smith. I got an email from whoever. And the stories that I'm hearing are amazing about, we have so many gifted teachers and administrators and staff personnel and service providers. And there's just a few goofy things that I hear, right? And I hear it. Like today, one of my lovely families got an email. The goal that they're supposed to work on this week is to list their child's, wait for it, their child's favorite chore and how that child does that chore at home and how long it takes them. While there's nothing wrong with that, the stuff that we're supposed to be working on remotely in special education is what? Tied to our need. And this child has cerebral palsy and is in a wheelchair. So it's a little frustrating for parents to get that as your goal for the week. So we had some clever responses back and forth. We didn't send them. So again, the information that you're getting from your school should be tied to what? Their need, right? So if a random, I would like for you to do this today and count how many, Indian paintbrushes and bluebonnets there are outside, while there's nothing wrong with that, you need to be doing something that's tied to your child's academic, behavioral, and functional IEP goals and their areas of deficit in their PLAF. So just remember that, and we'll get back to that in just a second. So the special education guidance was given to us to guide us, right? I always say you can either learn by instruction or experience. Most of us learn by experience, right? Why don't we just listen to instruction? Because I know I always do, don't I? And thanks be, if you guys know somebody that would benefit from this recording, just tag them in there. This is our 27th Facebook Live. They're going to be on here forever. We want you guys to have the content. We're loading up a YouTube channel so that maybe you can share that as well. People feel better with that. We'll always have Q&A. Send me your stuff. Email us at Karen@specialeducationboss.com or just drop it in the queue or the Facebook message area. We want to get your questions answered. They are all valid. I have friends on here from Virginia to California, and then, of course, all the wonderful people in Texas, where we have 5.5 million students in education. All right, so I'm gonna. We read this way in the beginning, right? Is it me, or now we no longer know what day it is? So I don't even know what day it is now. I don't know what month it is. I don't know. Is it 1976? Are we about to go to the Olympics? I can't be sure. Anyway, so special education guidance on evaluation considerations during COVID. So a lot of misinformation going out about this among my families and on social media. Everything stopped. So everything hasn't stopped. We're either having school, the schools are having a school remotely, and they're receiving funding for that, or we're not. So if we're closed and there's no education, that's something totally different, right? That occurred at the very beginning of COVID, and I certainly understand that. But now that we have remote learning, we're providing education to general ed students and special education students, things keep moving. So if you need an evaluation, if you need a reevaluation, if you need evaluations, none of that stops. So let me read you the guidelines from the state. And I would be pretty certain that your guidelines are the same from your state as they come from special education federal government, right? So as of the publication of this document, and I think the publication of this document was originally March 20th or April 3rd, it was someday, I don't know when it was. There has been no waiver of federal timelines related to special education compliance. So let's just kind of touch on that real quick. So the great Betsy DeVos inside of the CARES Act, which I was going to print out the other night, and anybody that knows me, Tricia knows, I'm kind of, I don't want to say I'm addicted to printing, if that's a bad thing. Printing's not a bad thing. I didn't print out the CARES Act because it was 880 pages long. If it had been 500, I might have printed it out. So in that CARES Act, there's a section that gives Betsy DeVos, who's the head of the special U.S. Department of Special Education, U.S. Department of Education, it gives her reach, I would say, or the ability to make decisions to waive components of IDEA if she so felt led. I wouldn't imagine she would felt led to do that, but what do I know? And I think from the day that it came out, we still have 7 more days. I'm not certain. Tricia will check on that for me. So, and that will either happen within the 30 days of the CARE Act happening, or it won't. But I haven't heard from anybody, from attorneys, from hearing officers, mediation officers, the smart people at the schools, leadership in education at the state levels, that we expect that to happen. Could it happen? Anything could happen, but I've seen no rumbling or inkling of that. So, therefore, evaluation, and because there's been no waiver of federal timelines related to special education compliance, so today is April 21st, Tuesday, April 21st, so as of today, there's been no waiver. Therefore, evaluation timelines will continue to apply for compliance reporting purposes. However, LEAs should prioritize health and safety of students. Whenever timelines are not able to be met during the COVID issue, please be sure to document the reason. This document contains both statutory guidance as well as practices for implementation. So one of the things that I want to go through, which I had to actually execute and use today. I was in a meeting the other day, and a very smart person in the meeting said she extracted children from the class. And then she said I was astute. I don't know if that's a good thing, but I feel like it is. She used very big words. So evaluation. The LEA, local education, receives a request for an FIIE, a full individual initial evaluation. Prominently display the contact details for the individual campus. You would reach out to the special education director, administrative employee. The parent should contact and request an evaluation for special education. So let's just kind of go back to pre-COVID. If you were my client or if you were one of my trainings, this is what I would tell you to do. This is the email you send. And while I appreciate that some advocate sites and some legal sites and all of this give you this really long letter with 15 statutes, I don't find that to be necessary. Here's the email that I would send if it was my kid or your kid that I was serving. Dear blank, and I would send it to everybody, cafeteria workers, the diagnostician, the principal, volleyball coach, whoever, the people that are part of your child's educational product. Dear blank, this is my formal request for Billy Smith to have special education testing. Areas of possible eligibility would be specific learning disabilities and attention. And that's pretty general for any of my kids, because for me, it's either going to present in testing one of 2 ways, either in a cognitive achievement profile or emotional behavioral psychological profile. And obviously, there's many things that you can test for if they had obviously functional needs or orthopedic impairment, those sorts of things. But that's a great just sort of intro. So areas of suspected disability are specific learning disabilities or attention. Areas of specific learning disabilities are, because you have to have a suspicion. The federal law child find says that local education agencies go out and find and identify and test students with suspected disabilities. I've never seen those people in my neighborhood where they're, hey, anybody having trouble reading in there? I've never seen those people, right? So almost always it's my experience, and it might be different where you live, that the parent is the one that initiates that. And so This is my formal request for Ability Smith to have special education testing. Areas of suspected disability are specific learning disabilities and attention, whether they're in play or not. We look forward to your written response. Do you see how it's not, you're not begging, you're believing? We look forward to your written response. So the LEA has a 15-day timeline to respond. 15 school days. So, right, so there's school days and then there's what? Calendar days. Very different. So 15 school days could be 21 paper days. So remember that. So while I love everybody on the planet, when I hear families say, well, we're just going to wait. What are you waiting for? I don't know what you're waiting for. You're not going to get time back. So the school has two choices when you request an evaluation. Just two. Number one, they grant it. Number two, they deny it. If they deny your request for education testing, COVID or no COVID, they have to give you a reason for denial provided to you in a PWN called a prior written notice. So if you need to beef up your request, do that. So that those timelines are met. So new families that I met just this week that were requesting testing this week. While it's unlikely that they'll be testing before August starts in school again, I want them to be in line. What does that mean? That means when you ask for testing, you don't get in, you get in line, right? There's 40 other kids at elementary school that have already put in for testing, then you get in line. So I certainly don't want my families to wait till we come back. So I'm not going to read it all to you, but there's some examples in here that are unbelievably important. The LEA should make every good faith effort to complete relevant components of the evaluation to the extent practical, given limitations for face-to-face evaluation. For example, in most cases, a review of existing evaluation data, a read, could be initiated to determine what, if any, additional data is needed to make an eligibility determination. See table at the end of this documentation. And then it goes further to say, if any components of the evaluation can be completed remotely without face-to-face interaction, the LEA should do that. So let me just give you an example. I had a kiddo who is nonverbal. He was evaluated 3, 2, and 10 months, and then he had his triennial evaluation last spring. He's nonverbal, so obviously he has a speech impairment if you're nonverbal, and he met eligibility in the area of language. So today we were talking about oral motor needs and a request for oral motor IEPs, and the conversation very quickly became, he can't have that. Ooh. I don't like when people say he can't have that, and I really don't like when people say he can't have that because it's the law. So what happens in evaluations, it does one of two things, right? It identifies or it eliminates. So for me, kind of like the law, I'm not an attorney, the bulk of law is implied. It's not, everything's not written out, right? So the law says don't kill people, right? It doesn't say don't kill people with a dark blue ballpoint pen, right? The bulk of it is implied, right? So for me, the implication, if you are nonverbal, would be that you don't have articulation within the normed range. But what do I know? So we kind of went back and forth. And I happened to just have this ready to read. And I said, so since you already know him, you worked with him, we could do the read. You don't need to physically touch him. And the wonderful diagnostician pointed out, the reason he didn't meet eligibility for articulation when he was 3 is because he was unable to complete the test, right? So we're going to do a functional evaluation, which is not a formal evaluation, but it has to be in that area of articulation because that's where a motor, oral motor goal would go. So it was lengthy. It was a lot of volleying stuff back over the net. But what I want you to know is we keep our position. We don't, it's like I tell my teenagers, I don't move my position based on your posse. I don't change my parenting because of what your peers say. So if you believe he needs a goal, and it will help him reach his desired outcome in special education, then I believe there's a framework for that. I think what happens is that schools get, they over-identify stuff sometimes. They over put parameters around it. And while I don't think there's anything wrong with that, I think it becomes limiting. And again, when IDEA was written in 1975, the intent was, as you read it originally, and it's never really changed much, the intent was, hey, we're going to equip the IEP team, right, the stakeholders, to get together, roll up their sleeves, and get to work to help Billy. And I think sometimes we overstate something that may or may not be in the law. So I just went back to reading the law, and the law did not say anything about you have to have an articulation disorder to legally have a oral motor goal. It didn't say that. It didn't say that. So anyway, so we tabled the IEP meeting, and we're doing the read, and then we will come back at the end of the month to finish his annual IEP meeting. So and the parents are letting me share this. So in the middle of it, as we're in the Zoom IEP meeting, the parents are like, just pull him out of speech. Just pull him out of speech. Just pull him out of speech. And I'm not going to let any of my families do that, but I don't want to do that. When it gets uncomfortable, we don't back out. We actually press in, right? Because sometimes we got to work out the hard things. So it was a healthy conversation, probably a little uncomfortable for the parent, but parents don't necessarily understand all the legal requirements or jargon or acronyms, but whatever it is we need to do to get him the success he needs, then let's do that. And I never want parents to go, just forget it, just forget it. No, if he has a need that's going to make him successful, and it's related to his disability, then we can, as a committee, consider writing IEP goals around that to mitigate and reduce the impact of that deficit. So again, the evaluations, so that was kind of what the school was saying. Well, we could do the reevaluation, but we can't do it. We're not doing evaluations till we come back. I just gently read this to them. I said, well, actually, till we come back is not part of the guidance. It might be part of the guidance tomorrow, but it was not part of the guidance today. So special ed keeps going, right? Special ed keeps going, 504 keeps going. So you need to know your rights and your responsibilities. And you're welcome to reach out to us or our team. We're happy to get you an answer or refer you to somebody that can. But know your rights, especially in times like these. So we've been talking about goals, which is really important. I know that you guys are, hopefully now you're in receipt of your child's IEP goals. If you don't have your child's special education documentation, just ask your diagnostician or LSSP. She can provide it to you electronically. Pull out those goals, look at the components of it, look what they're measuring. As a lovely young lady sent me a data collection sheet that we talked about last night, it had 20 IEP goals, and the teacher told her to collect data on it. I mean, collect data, not, right, that we worked for 10 minutes on Tuesday, but collect data. Is that your responsibility to collect data and progress on IEP monitoring? It's not. It's just not. You haven't been trained to do that. Do I certainly want you to collaborate with the school and share information that's meaningful? Absolutely. So again, get that book and keep that timeline. So I'm going to read this quote again. It's so good. So this is about collaborating, co-laboring. Even today at the end of it, the principal, who was lovely at the school, said, thank you for working through this. I know this is hard. And I said, it's always the hardest right before you have the baby, right? But that's how we get there. So don't step back because it gets hard. We just got to work through it. So this is a great quote about listening. So when we're in a meeting, even if it gets a healthy bantering, we have to listen. And this quote is amazing. Listening is not a vocal competition in which the one who is catching their breath is called a listener. Now, I don't know that I've ever caught my breath, but listening is not a vocal competition in which the one who is catching his breath is called a listener. So today on this IEP with this wonderful little amazing superstar, there were 13 people there. So that's a lot of people talking and wanting to talk and have input. So we listen not to wait for our turn to speak, but we listen so that we can effectively address where our differences are in a special ed meeting. And there's nothing wrong with having differences. There just isn't. Okay, so IEP goals, we want them to be SMART, remember? So we trained on this last night. April 20th. And so SMART IEPs are what? So that's an acronyms, right? SMART, S-M-A-R-T. So the SMART stands for what? Specific. We need it to be specific to a child's deficit. Number 2, M, it needs to be measurable. What am I measuring? How do I get from 100 Elm to 100 Main? What's the criterion? What's the percentages? Those sorts of things. Use action words. So he will, not an action word. While it is an action word, it's an action word to tie the rest of the goal together. He will XYZ with this support as evidenced by. But he will improve his reading, not the correct action word. R, it needs to be realistic and relevant. Relevant. How many of you guys know that Karen wants to hear about plateaus? No. It needs to be relevant. It needs to be an IEP goal that was relevant 8 years ago is not relevant now, right? What happens in their world? What happens in their community? What happens in their educational product? And then last but not least, time limited. What does that mean? So the time limited, the longest time that we write IEP goals is for 36 instructional weeks. I often see schools want to sort of volley over the net or tee up 18 months, but we only plan and program for 36 instructional weeks, which is 365 or 366 days. Otherwise, writing something for past that would be called predetermination, and we don't know what we don't know. I always say that my crystal ball is in the shop, not expected to be repaired anytime soon. Okay, so measurable academic, functional, and behavioral goals. So the great Abby sent me this today and reminded me how smart she is. So for a student who receives special education services in general ed mainstream setting and does not have modified content in any subject area, the committee must still make measurable goals. And the criteria is A, from a critical area of need addressed in the student's PLAF that affects the student's ability to progress and or access the general ed curriculum. So kind of like, let's tease that apart. So the PLAF, present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. It gives me data points about how a child presents academically, functionally, behaviorally, and or without related supports and instructional supports and services. And that PLAF came from what originally? The FIIE, the full initial individual evaluation and or any subsequent outside evaluation, ancillary information, anecdotal notes, videos, updated reevaluations, and read those sorts of things, progress reports. And B, to clearly define the specifically designed instruction, special education services the student will receive. So that's what we're going to have tonight. So it clearly defines the specifically designed instruction, SDI, specifically designed instruction, and special education services that the student will need. So a lot of times I will see a goal and we're teaching Billy Smith to use his accommodations. I don't know that that's specifically designed instruction. Specifically designed instruction is where we're identifying that an IEP, individualized, what does he need above what the general ed class needs in this content area to be successful? And we tease that out. Again, I want you to make sure that you know what that is. How does specifically designed instruction relate to goals? The student annual goals define the specifically designed instruction special education services he or she needs in order to access and progress in the general ed curriculum. If the committee is unable to determine a need for annual goals, then the ARD committee may need to reconsider if a disability creates a need for special education services. So a lot of times I'll go into an IEP meeting and read the goals. They're not really designed around a deficit, or after 36 instructional weeks, he's mastered these goals. So then we're in another conversation. Is he in fact in need of special education and related services and specifically designed instruction, or does he D and Q in special ed and we're looking at a 504 support? So again, special education is not a location, it's a service. And the point is to deliver that service, that support, that restrictive environment, or I would call a support environment, so that we can teach the student strategies to self-manage their disability. The intent is not for the disability to evaporate, but in fact teach them strategies and supports to self-manage their disability. Okay? So those are the IEP goals. We need to measure them. When you go into your Zoom meetings or your next meeting, you now know that you're going to have the IEP progress reports from the last 36 instructional weeks. A couple days ago, I was on a Zoom, and we're having a meeting, and there's 85 people, right? And I had one piece of paper, and anybody that knows me, I go like this. I just have one piece of paper, and it was the child's PLAF. So I'm the great assumer. I assume that if you just sent me a PLAF, it's just a review or a revision art. It's not an annual art. And the opening line said, Cindy Smith is a nonverbal student at school. I don't think nonverbal is an educational eligibility. And it had 4 little paragraphs. So I didn't have anything to prep on. I didn't have a draft of the IEP document to include but not limited to present levels, goals, accommodations, and schedule of services page or determination of services page. So we had to table it. Again, you have the right to go into your meeting informed. The federal law actually says, the school by law actually does not have to provide you a draft. That is a misnomer. It's just not true. They have to give you the opportunity to be part of the process, but they don't have to provide you a draft. However, if we get into the meeting and I haven't been provided a draft, I always say it's unlikely we'll be able to make an informed decision, and we may have to reschedule. So you're part of that process. What should be on the progress reports? Lots of typing, Carla. Lots and lots of typing. So what would be on the IEP progress report would be the goal, right? The annual goal, and then they break it out into objectives. Of course, we talked about this last night. Not every goal needs to have objectives and or behavior, or benchmarks. So, Billy will increase his reading rate from 140 words per minute to 145 words per minute. So it would say, in progress, mastered, and then it says is more support needed for the student to maintain this goal and master it, or it will say, is student expected to master this goal within the annual time? And you would say yes. Is more assistance needed? And almost always schools say no. And then in the comment section next to it, other than he's at 50%, is not really data for me. So that IEP progress report was populated by the service provider, by the teacher of record, by the support staff. I want to know what the raw data says. Should it just state the goal is mastered? It should not. It should give me some information. It's called the comment section. I love that. I invented the comment section, right? So what was going on? What made her successful? Were you able to fade prompts? Did you use a new curriculum that helped her out? Those sorts of things. So that you can know, Carla, what did they do to help Sally Smith be successful on these goals? So if it doesn't have information other than the goal is mastered, this is what I ask for from the school. Please provide me the raw data that populated the IEP progress report, right? So we don't just come in serving 70 kids a year and go, mastered. There's another sheet of paper that has this a daily tracking or weekly tracking. Again, you want to make sure in your IEP goals, who is the implementer, who's collecting data, who's delivering the goal, in what setting, and how often do they track data. I don't need you to track data 52 times a day. I don't want teachers walking around with a clipboard. I want them to teach, right? But we can't collect data twice in a 9-week period, nor do we need to collect data every 7 seconds. So I'm also the queen of eliminating goals. We don't need 4 math goals. We don't. We might need 4 behavior goals if they have 4 targeted behaviors. We might need 4 speech goals, depending on the acuity of their speech impairment. But we do not need 75 academic goals. They should be what? Related to their eligibility and area of need. So that's sort of it on the IEP goals. We want to make sure that you've pulled them out, looked at them. And again, what do? We take the IEP progress from this year, we match it up to last year. So when I'm asking for paperwork ahead of time, it's not to be adversarial, it's so that I can compare, right? Billy Smith was here, he was reading at a Fontenay Pinnell H, and now he's reading at a Fontenay Pinnell H. I had that happen the other day. And Billy Smith had repeated kindergarten. So for me, the school didn't like when I said it, but in my mind, which then comes out of my mouth, I would say he'd regressed. And why would I say that? Because he did the same content twice and he's still at the same level. Now, of course, we didn't put that on the paperwork, but did this intervention move him up at the rate of progress? And it didn't. So then we have to look at LRE, least restrictive environment, a more restrictive setting, or as I like to say, a more appropriate supported setting. You can make it sound awful and you can make it sound awesome. And so some of the pitfalls that people have, as parents, you got to be vigilant. You got to stick and stay, right? You got to stick the landing, Bella Caroli, right? We don't move on our position. Again, an educational intervention is as important as a medical intervention. You got to the school and you said, my child takes insulin twice a day because he's diabetic, and the school said, yeah, we don't see it. You wouldn't go, okay, I'll just give him a candy bar at lunch. No, you wouldn't move off of that position. The danger for parents is the IEP will propose annual goals that are not specific and measurable and do not meet the needs. And the student, the parent, states what they want, and they are sometimes told no for whatever reason. And the parent says, okay. So no might be the right answer, but you want to make sure. Advising about your child's progress. Did you know that the school must inform you about your child's educational progress on a regular basis? It's called the IEP Progress Report, a description of the progress towards annual goals. It will be measured when periodic reports on the progress report is delivered, so you'll get a report card and then a progress report with it. They are delivered quarterly and or other periodic report times. So schools send those to you in a grading period. So most grading periods in public elementary schools and junior highs and high schools are either 6 weeks and or 9 weeks. Your job to watch that. It's your job to keep an eye on that. And again, you can always review and revise. It's a working document. It is not set in stone. These are not the 10 commandments. We can take things apart and put them back together. And I'm the first person to go, is this an educational need? Do we need to follow him around to measure the sum total of an obtuse triangle? I mean, who even knows what the sum of an obtuse triangle is? You know what the sum is? The whole thing. So I hope that's helpful. You guys, write in the comments what you liked best about this information, what you need more of in this training area, because it is the foundation of the IEP document. What have we identified that we need to work on for this child to have successful student outcomes? Your child can be in there and lead and collaborate on the IEP team. They need you to do that. Okay, so document. You guys have any more questions? Thank you so much for always jumping on. We're going to be here every night, Sunday through Thursdays, 9 p.m. Central during COVID, which I think is going to be lasting till, I don't know, the year 3000. But thank you for loving your kiddos. Thank you for what you're doing. Again, you're there to support your child in the best way that you know how. Give them as much screen time as you as a mom or dad think is appropriate, and then inform the school what you could do, what you couldn't do. When we come back to brick and mortar, which I believe is going to be in the fall, you're welcome, you guys, we will consider if there is a need for convening an IEP meeting and to talk about compensatory time. So when we get closer to that, we're going to really tease out in June and this summer what I believe compensatory time is, what that might look like for your kiddo, and what I wouldn't want you to take as compensatory time, unless it's hairspray. We're always going to take hairspray. So compensatory time is a legal remedy to provide relief for a student when he wasn't provided part of his special education and or IEP and or 504 services. So obviously the school hasn't done something wrong. We're just not in person. We're not delivering those 350 instructional minutes in person. So, and we'll talk more about that later in June. So thanks, you guys. Tag somebody, repost this as you're going to stay up. If there's anything you want to train on, people, I don't know why, but they feel more comfortable sending me an email. Our IEP meeting is canceled due process filed by school. Ooh, I would want to know more about that. Tell the boys I said hello, and just to go, as my mama would say, what these kids need to do is go outside and let the stank blow off of them. She didn't say it quite like that. She did. But yeah, let your kids be kids. So that is that. So you guys, welcome to drop a question in the queue if you want to be, we're going to train on something else. We're going to finish out this week with IEPs and the components of that. And then monitoring, we're going to go over monitoring tomorrow night. Monitoring, exciting. Send me an email if you have a question that you don't want everybody else to hear or something you want trained on. People are sending me redacted information. So send me your goofy email from your school. Send me your great email from your school, because almost all the teachers are getting it right. But if there's some areas of need, it's likely that somebody else from coast to coast on this training is having the same area of need. So I want to be able to provide you with the language to get that fixed. And you can always email us at Karen, Karen at specialeducationboss.com. When we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody. Thanks for what you guys do. Keep working with those kiddos. Don't karate chop your husband, right? And we're going to get through this together. If you need something, let us know, and we'll see you in the next live video.